Let's officially get started then. I want to welcome everyone to the Great Plains Ideas Community Development Student Council seminar. This is session 1 of the seminar. We'll be having subsequent sessions as we go throughout the year. But our first session is on housing and the housing system in general. The goal of these sessions is to talk with people who actually work in the field in these various areas. So we have we have 3 panel members here who have joined us for this session. So I will give them a brief introduction and thank them for being a part of the panel. I guess just to start, my name is Andrew Isola. I'm a member of the Student Council for the Community Development Program. We also have with us Marc Unger, who's a Student Council member as well. And Marc is the program manager for a housing services nonprofit called Tenfold in York County, Pennsylvania. We also have Jason Webb with us, who is the Community and Technical Assistance Principal for Grounded Solutions Network. Jason is located in Florida, but Grounded Solutions does work all over the country. And then last but not least, we have Kathleen Barker with us, who is a planner in Kern County, California, in their Planning and Natural Resources Department. So welcome to the 3 of you, and thank you for taking time to be here with us today. I want to start just by asking, if I could, would you all take some time to tell us a bit about yourself and how you ended up working in the housing field? And I'll let you go popcorn style. Whoever wants to go first can go.
Okay, we'll take the ladies first approach. So my name is Kathleen Barker. I started in 2 or 3 years ago, and I specifically work in community development. So for our county, my division manages the HUD Community Development Block Grant funding that has been allocated to our county. So in addition to environmental clearances and reviewing projects and organizations for the projects they want to submit annually, then I also act on our side as more of the project manager for each of those projects with the construction pre-bid, managing the construction on our end as far as making sure all of our HUD requirements are met, and then authorizing payments to our grantees as the project moves along and finishes certain phases. And then prior to that, I worked for Public Works in their building inspection department as their administrative coordinator. And I also have experience in working in code compliance as an administrative coordinator. So I would put the packages together for the Board of Supervisors authorizing the use of public funds to abate properties and to clean up different issues that were happening within the county. And prior to that, I worked in the public sector for a utility construction company, and just worked in doing a lot of their project management and also billing and stuff like that for different utility projects that they had going on throughout the state and the western areas.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Marc Unger. Like Andrew said, I am a program manager with the local nonprofit Tenfold. We are a FIP, which is a Fair Housing Initiatives program designated by HUD to provide education and empowerment in fair housing law. And we also specialize in landlord-tenant law as well for the state. Our nonprofit focuses primarily on discrimination issues in housing, supporting folks through the process of filing complaints against landlords or property managers. We also provide mediation services for landlords and tenants for disputes that do not involve discrimination. And I manage what's called the York Rental Stability Network, which is a small risk mitigation program where we work with partner providers to help hard to house folks through the rental process. These clients are typically at an income where they can afford a rental property, but face other barriers like credit, bad landlord references, eviction history, criminal record, in order to get their foot in the door in some of these rental applications. And then we also provide the landlord with mitigation funding at the end of tenancy as a small incentive for that program. Like I said, mediation services and education on fair housing and landlord-tenant law. That's my current position. Previously, I worked in the public sector with our city's Human Relations Commission, which directly investigates housing, employment, and public accommodation discrimination. And before that, I worked with another nonprofit, a community development financial institution, one county over, providing financing on small business and affordable housing projects. In the Community Development Master's Program, I am currently pending final approval from the graduate school here for my summer semester in order to graduate this term. So it's been a great 2 years, and I look forward to talking about those 2 years in conjunction with my career.
Thanks, Mark.
So my name is Jason Webb. As Andrew said, I am the Community and Technical Assistance Principal at Grounded Solutions Network. We're a national nonprofit membership-based organization that works with, pretty much anybody that is looking towards advancing lasting affordable housing solutions. So we'll work with, community groups. We'll also work with municipalities, policymakers, and we have certain models that we are experts in. So we come alongside those groups and work with those groups to implement those specific models. My journey of how I came into the housing field probably goes back like 35 years. I've been sort of doing this work. Grew up in Boston, Massachusetts, in a community called Dudley Street. Spent a number of my younger years sort of being an organizing and planning associate with the Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative, which is an organizing and planning group that looked at about a 60-acre area right in the heart of Roxbury, which is a community in Boston, to really look at and really empower those residents to go ahead and help with the revitalization of their community. Of this 60-acre area, about 30, roughly about half of that land was left vacant and abandoned through white flight, through disinvestment. So we worked very hard to sort of get control of the land and actually start what is now known to be one of the largest urban community land trusts in the country, called Dudley Neighbors Incorporated. So my previous positions, I used to sit on the board of directors of that community land trust, then transferred on to being a part of staff and ran the organization for about 15 years as their executive director. Was able to see a portfolio of about 225 units of affordable housing take shape and actually get developed in my own community. A number of years ago, I had the privilege of welcoming my son into this world and realized that I wanted to do something bigger. So I sort of had the opportunity to come onto the national stage at Grounded Solutions Network. I am the lead technical assistance advisor that gets deployed out throughout the country to work with groups to really bring different affordable housing strategies to bear. So that's a little bit of my testimonial and how I came into this housing field.
Thank you, Jason. Would you all, I know you've all sort of touched on this briefly, but would you all give us just a little bit of a picture of what your day-to-day work looks like?
I can go first. My day-to-day is primarily working with tenants, landlords, municipal officials, property managers, and social service providers who are also supporting our clients as well. I'll get phone calls about fair housing concerns. Why won't my landlord fix my roof? All the way up to eviction prevention counseling which I also provide, not officially, but we can at least let them know what that process looks like and how to move through it smoothly. In this current rental market, we've seen a sharp uptick in landlord-tenant filings that may look different around the country. It's also known as an eviction filing. So a lot of that has been, receiving calls from folks, but it's very on the ground work, supporting clients, whether they are landlords or tenants, in whatever needs they may have.
Go ahead, Kathy.
So my work day to day doesn't necessarily, I don't get to work with the public very often. I do act as more of a help to our home access and our home funded division in just providing information about properties that they can continue to work with the tenants or the owners on. For our home access division, they have specific funding that just helps low income residents with ADA compliance. So if it's an elderly person that's living in the home and their home is, they need ramps put in, or they need more ADA appropriate bathroom installation put in, then we provide that funding in order to make those changes for their home. And then I do the environmental clearances for that. So I just make sure there's different requirements. It can't be in a flood zone, which we have a lot of them here in Kern County. So there's just different things that I have to go through and check each one of those just to make sure environmentally that it's clear that they can proceed with that work. So I provide support to them that way. And then other than that, just working with our grantees and our potentially future grantees on their different projects that they're devising at that time. And we're getting ready to start our annual plan process where we'll start accepting applications for the CDBG funding that we receive annually. So we'll start receiving applications from nonprofits and from public entities for their projects that they either want to continue and use some of our funding or new projects that they're starting. So I work with them.
So day to day, I am working with probably 5 or 6 groups a day. Because we work nationally, I can be in sort of Portland, Maine to start my day, end up in Oakland, California, in terms of the need that is out there. So for Grounded Solutions Network, we do a lot of training. So on any given day, I might be hosting a 60 to 90 minute conversation with a number of groups that want to just know more about what shared equity housing is and what specific models are out there. On another day, I might be doing some actual technical assistance work, either through online platform. And now with business travel starting to pick back up, I'm actually being deployed back into the field where on any specific trip is usually 2 to 3 days on the ground, really working with groups, trying to get more education out there or doing specific workshops with them and trying to figure out how we can bring together all the different partners that are needed to implement these types of housing models. So if I'm working with a community group, it's usually trying to bring some of the elected officials and some of the city program staff together to really figure out how we can leverage the resources that Kathy just talked about in terms of CDBG or home dollars. How can we make those dollars go further? And so on any given day, I'm working with, a number of different groups all throughout the country, just continuing to try to move the needle on the affordable housing crisis that we're all facing.
Thank you. Jason, I'm going to put this next question to you first. now granted, this question is based largely on my experience, so I may be wrong in this one. But it seems to me that more than any other field that I've worked in, the folks who work in the housing fields have a much broader range of education than in other areas. People who are in banking typically have studied finance and then they go into the banking world. People who work in the medical field, they've studied in the medical field and they've gone into work in the medical field. For folks who work in the housing field, that range of education is so much broader than in many other fields. So I was just wondering if you could, to start us out with, if you could tell us a bit about your educational background and the things that you've learned that have contributed to the work that you're doing, contributed to your overall perhaps ethos for the work that you do.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So my sort of traditional path was, business management, and that's how sort of my formal education is based in, and that's why I feel like I was probably a really good executive director of a nonprofit, because I had that sort of mentality. But you're absolutely right. In the housing field itself, you have to be almost a jack of all trades, because housing is so central to everyone sort of living and being, that sometimes you have to understand people and also systems at the same time. So because I've been in this field from a very early age, I was able to sort of also learn by doing. So for me and my own community that I helped to revitalize, a lot of my education was basically on the job, and a lot of the adults were more than happy to throw me into the deep end to say, hey, sink or swim. So so some of my education around sort of policy and around government policy came from actually sitting down and trying to negotiate with city councilors, with mayors on how to move the affordable housing needle, and also how do you actually use some of the current laws that are on the books to your advantage. One of the things that our nonprofit still has the designation of is that we're the only nonprofit in the entire US that was granted the power eminent domain by their municipality. And the power eminent domain gave our nonprofit the ability to go ahead and revitalize our community the way we saw fit, and not what municipal government thought was best for our own community. And to sort of sit and learn from some of the other trained professionals, like our law firm that was Gooston Stores, which is, a very large legal firm, and sort of hear from them on how to deal with real estate law. I sort of walk into a lot of conversations with that, learned knowledge and learned experience. But my formal education has been around business management.
Kathy, I'll pass to you.
So my education background, I have a bachelor's degree in public administration. And my path to housing more came, I didn't even know I was on the path to housing until you look back and look at it and you're like, oh my gosh, all of my experiences in the different jobs that I've held and the different positions that I have found myself in really led me to be able to be, as Jason said, you have to be multifaceted in the things that you know and the people you've talked to and the situations you've been in. And really looking back on it while he was talking, that's what led me into housing and now getting my master's degree in community development. It wasn't even on my radar, community development, until I got the position as a planner for the community development division. And then from there, in just reviewing where I've been in my my career that has been varied, it really just seems like it's all been planned anyway. and it was just happenstance. But the public administration degree really helped as far as understanding that difference between private sector, where I had worked for a majority of my life, and moving into public sector and the nuances that come with that. But even in working in private sector, a lot of my job that I had, because I worked in substance abuse treatment, we had public entities that we had to work with in different communities and all of that for clinics that we came into. So that's also helped in just being able to speak with a wide range of people and the different protocols that come with that when you're speaking with government entities.
Yeah, and I can just tie it up here. Looking back at my educational background, I have a bachelor's in political science, and hopefully at the end of this week, a master's in community development. Really, I think the key theme from my education has been interdisciplinary. Looking at my current work right now, coming into it, I work with former bankers, former nurses, former servers, and bartenders. In the housing field, really all the training that's necessary is very, very easy to put into professional development curriculum. For our department specifically, we do provide consultation on very complicated state and federal law for folks. And month one, we provide an opportunity for a fair housing specialist certification. We give folks lead paint assessment certifications, practice with house inspections. Like I said, we have the mediation services. We don't expect people either to know what mediation is or have years and years of experience. We partner with organizations in the area to provide that training for incoming staff. So I think at least in the nonprofit world, especially in housing, I think it really comes down to the type of individual that is best suited for the kind of work, and the education comes along with it. Getting into the housing sector, it really, just takes a can-do attitude, and especially in the nonprofit sector, an acceptance of a small taste of chaos, as I like to say, in navigating different relationships and serving folks in the best format possible. But looking at my community development education with GPIDEA, I think that I didn't have a housing focus when I started, but after coursework and implementing it practically through my work, I think it slowly funneled into, I want to be with a housing nonprofit. I want to serve the community. Here's how I can best do that with the theoretical tools.
Well, thank you. So I'd like us now to shift over to conversation about the housing, sort of the housing system, for lack of a better way to say it. So Kathy, I'm going to start with you. Would you be willing to share with us some of the needs that you're seeing in the housing system in the country, whether they be individual or localized needs, or even just, systemic needs?
So for us in California, there is definitely, there is a shift for affordable housing, but also helping those with a lack of housing, finding safe alternatives to living on the street. So one of our current projects that we're in development with, finishing the environmentals on, is a navigation center. It's been up and running. It's actually right across the street from our public services building. But what it does, it's a homeless center that has a lower threshold for admittance. So on some of our homeless centers, there is a higher threshold as far as drug use and the amount of property that a person can bring into the center or what they're not allowed, including pets and animals and things like that. This navigation center was developed in cooperation with our local city, Bakersfield, and with the county and some nonprofits, including Community Action Partnership of Kern, in developing this housing model for transients and for homeless that provides that lower threshold so they can bring their animals. There are kennels available. They do have storage space available for a lot of property that wouldn't be allowed in this more dorm type setting. There's laundry facilities, there's restroom facilities, and it's more of a day. I think everybody leaves during the day, but it's available in the evenings for them to come and just have a safe place for that night. It's been very successful so far, and we're actually working on some remodeling to expand the laundry and restroom facilities and shower facilities so that they have a better capacity for the amount of people who are using the navigation center. Some of the other things we have in the state, even though we have accessory dwelling units in our state regulations, there's been a recent Senate bill that now allows, it's similar to accessory dwelling units, but it now allows a property owner to, for a one-time split their property and do a subdivision of at least a 50-50 or a 60-40 split, as long as there's 1,200 square feet in the parcel. And then they can have up to 2 dwelling units per parcel in that. Some of the, they refer to it as SB 9. There's different zoning impacts, impact fees that are different than our accessory dwelling unit options, but it does provide yet another avenue for additional housing and additional availability for the citizens of California. With the SB 9, they also, it cannot be short-term rentals, so no Airbnbs or VRBOs for that. It has to be for long-term rental opportunities.
And does that, I'm just interested, does it have to be a rental opportunity for SB 9?
It's fairly new for me. So in some of the trainings that I have attended, I'm not sure how ownership goes for those units. I believe they are for tenant occupancy and not necessarily for owner occupancy, but I'm not entirely sure. I can definitely do some more research and send it to you, just for my own knowledge too, would be helpful. But I believe right now it is at least for tenant occupancy, knowing that a lot of people have their ability to own property is limited, but their ability to rent or be eligible to rent, they would have a higher opportunity for housing.
Sure, sure. Neat. Well, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So just looking at the needs from a nonprofit perspective, I think affirmatively furthering affordable housing, as well as affirmatively furthering fair housing, try to say that 4 times fast, is really the key principle, at least for our organization and what we're seeing in the Mid-Atlantic and in Pennsylvania. Recent data showed from 2020 to 2021, the Bureau of Labor Statistics saw a wage inflation of just over 5%, but the Zillow rental index for the same period saw a rent price increase of 17%. So coming out of the pandemic, we're seeing areas with less rent control laws, with sharp upticks in rental pricing, and it's pricing people out of generations of families in those neighborhoods. And you know, there's only so much that we can do as a social service nonprofit. over the last couple of years, we've had emergency rental assistance, which was helpful in preventing evictions and supporting folks that face losses due to COVID. But now that we're coming out of COVID, knock on wood, we need to look at alternative approaches to rental assistance beyond direct payments, whether that's supports in communications between parties, looking at long-term solutions in eviction prevention, and just making sure everyone has all the necessary resources to navigate such a contentious rental market. And I mean, the same thing goes for the home buying market. We are in, I can only speak for Pennsylvania and the Mid-Atlantic, but right now we are in a seller's market. Time after time after time, we are seeing people waive inspections. They are not requesting what used to be a foundational document in the contract process. And people are buying homes that 3 days later, the duct tape could come apart, and they are responsible for all of those damages now, which could have been prevented with what used to be a staple. So we're in a seller's market, we're in a landlord market on the rental marketplace. So just finding alternative supports for folks to get through this time period is going to be critical.
And Mark, just for those of us who may not know, can you tell us what fair housing looks like from your organization's perspective, and maybe some needs that might exist on the fair housing side?
Sure. So fair housing law originates from the Civil Rights Act in 1968, as amended in 1988. It prevents housing providers from discriminating on the basis of race, color, national origin, sex, disability, familial status, and a few other protected classes as well. So what we're looking at with fair housing is making sure that landlords and property managers are not making decisions on applications, services provided, terms and conditions, or terminating leases based on those protected classes. Just as recently as 2020 and 2021, sexual orientation and gender identity was included through the HUD Warden memo into the definition of sex under non-discrimination in housing. So the protections are growing, but the unfortunate reality is that discrimination is becoming more subtle as years go on. So our organization sees knowledge as power. We want to make sure tenants can recognize when discrimination may be occurring and what their rights are, whether that's filing a complaint with their local Human Relations Commission or Fair Housing Commission, don't know the names around the country, or with Fair Housing Equal Opportunity at the federal level with the HUD office.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And also to sort of somewhat piggyback off of Mark's point of affordable housing, for Grounded Solutions Network, we're trying to push the needle of lasting affordable so that affordable housing is actually forever. One of the things that we're starting to see throughout the country is that a number of municipalities about 30 years ago had these brilliant ideas of doing time-limited deed restrictions that would literally just run out at a certain time. And over the past 2 years, those clocks have come up and are actually expiring. So in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of a seller's market, you actually have what was once to be affordable home ownership. Now their deed restrictions actually expire, and you have homeowners that are literally sort of cashing in on a highly appreciated market in some places. So that's where, the models around shared equity that is sort of built around this philosophy of trying to balance out how much appreciation a family should be able to take out of a community. Because once you have one family that goes ahead and actually sells a property in a community above what would be the market, they start to create what the new market is. One of the things that we have seen locally here in Florida is once the pandemic started, we started to see a huge influx of actually foreign investors buying up real estate at an alarming rate. And that actually increased and pushed up the market prices of most of the new homes that are being built. So to Mark's sort of point of folks were not even thinking about home inspections, it was actually somewhat by design, because they realized that, again, the US economy is one of the most durable. In a pandemic, where do you want to put your cash is actually in a model where you know that the real estate market is only going to appreciate. And for places like Florida, where it is about tourism, it is about that rental income, it is about that vacation home, we have seen homes in Central Florida go up over the past 3 years by 300%. And that is not just the migration of folks from what a lot of Floridians would say from up north coming down and retiring. It's actually from a lot of the investors that are having straw buyers just go and buy homes, sometimes even sight unseen, just so that they can actually put their investments. So again, in terms of the housing need, we're in an affordable housing crisis because of some of the past system errors that were made in terms of policy. And some of those policies are now coming. And for some cities that cannot produce land, like Kathy was talking about, they're trying to come up with creative solutions in trying to divide parcels to try to put more density in, because there was never, in my opinion, a forever sort of strategy around how to keep homes permanently affordable. It was always a sense of, well, that community is always going to be affordable. Look at the population that's there. In some ways, it was that blatant. That's always going to be affordable, to now having a number of those families actually being pushed out. One of the scary things that we saw in like Detroit, Michigan, after they sort of emerged from bankruptcy, a number of housing groups and Grounded Solutions said, do you guys want to think about affordable housing? And they all laughed and they said, everything's affordable. Take that 10 years, forward. And there are certain parts of Detroit that are now being priced out because they didn't put any affordable protections in place. They just said, hey, we're just going to rebuild this. And we're not going to worry about affordability because everything else is affordable. We're always going to stay affordable. And now they actually have some communities inside Detroit that are now trying to figure out, wait a minute, how can we stop this seller's market because we're losing our community through gentrification. So that's what I have seen on a national level, the idea of sort of housing needs. It's not just about affordable housing, but how can we get down to permanent affordable housing, whether that's home ownership or whether that's rental.
Thank you. I'm conscious of our time here, so I might start breezing through our questions here. Would you all be willing to? I guess Jason, you spoke the most about the pandemic. I won't ask all of you to answer this question, but if you all have thoughts, are there things that have changed or that the pandemic caused that have come to light now that we're, again, knock on wood, sort of at the other end of the pandemic?
Yeah, it's a great question. So from my standpoint, and I would love to hear other people's opinions, I feel like, especially in the affordable housing arena, it's been a little bit of a roller coaster ride. Like in the depths of the pandemic, we actually saw a pretty good uptick in qualified buyers that were able to actually buy at reasonable interest rates. And now, as we're coming out of the pandemic and as some additional measures are being sort of put into the system of increasing the interest rates, we're now seeing a number of families that only like a year ago would have been able to buy a home now actually being priced out just on the simple fact of the interest rate. That the interest rate literally doubled and was sort of gave that family a horrible slash of their buying power to actually get into their first home ownership opportunity. And these are things that we're trying to figure out on a national level. How I understand that the government wants to try to cool down inflation. And we're starting to see a cool off of housing prices. But again, when you don't have a good analysis of actually what is pushing up housing prices for a place like Florida, it's a lot of the international money coming in. Just doing an interest rate is not going to actually help because these folks are coming to the table with cash. So they're not even looking at financing. They're just buying homes on site for the price that's listed. And the only folks that actually are getting hurt are the folks towards the bottom of the income bracket into actually getting into home ownership. So that's something that we've seen that's been very troubling as we're trying to come out of the pandemic, that just last year, we saw a number of programs continuing to try to keep up with the demand of having those qualified buyers getting into homes at a reasonable interest rate.
I think one of the other things, as far as home affordability, is if we look at some of the policies during the pandemic when you had eviction moratoriums. So you had people not either being able to pay their rent or chose not to pay their rent, however that might happen. You still have that homeowner on the back end that still has a mortgage on that second home that they were renting out that still owes that mortgage at the end. So part of coming out of the pandemic, I believe I'm not sure about California. I think there still may be an eviction moratorium or it's getting ready to end. You still have those homeowners that are trying to recoup that two and a half years of rent that they didn't get, and mortgages that they're still trying to pay. They're trying to recoup that, which also pushes up those prices. So I know of a couple different stories from personal friends where they've had second homes that they were renting. The moratorium caused them to lose a significant amount of money, plus damage done to their property. And their solution was to sell it for as much as they could to try to recoup any of the loss that they got during that 2.5 years and just got out of the rental market altogether. So it prices people out of that affordable home in a desired location that would have been more affordable prior to the pandemic had they chosen to sell. But now, because they're just trying to recoup some loss and their nest egg or whatever it was for them to have that rental property, they're trying to recoup that. And so now they're in a position where they're having to sell at a higher price or choosing to sell at a higher price in order just to just offset some of the loss that they have felt also on the homeowner end.
Can I ask a question? Kathy, some of us in the housing field felt like when the moratoriums were put in place for renting, that it should have been extended also for home ownership. Like everything should have just been frozen and would have given folks at least a place where their investment, they didn't feel like they needed to recoup so much because those renters were on that moratorium.
It should have been, in my personal opinion, not connected to my employment at L. it should have been for an equitable amount of time, both for the renter and for the homeowner. I believe the moratorium for mortgages, if you were put in a position of not being able to pay, it was there for a certain portion of the pandemic, but that expired prior to the eviction moratorium expiring. And some of that is, it caused that discrepancy between home ownership and renting, created some of the juxtaposition that we're seeing now with just housing being, I mean, I hope when I get ready to sell that my neighbor sells their house for as much as possible, but still, I know on the other end of the person buying, they need to be in a position to be able to afford that. So, and especially like in places of Los Angeles, they don't have a lot of place to expand. So there's not new housing going up. They're either repurposing structures that are already there. They're rebuilding on established housing lots, or like the lot split, they're subdividing properties that are already tiny to begin with. I mean, Jason, you brought up Andrew, you brought up the point before we started that Kern County is one of the larger counties in California. We have a lot of land, but what we're trying to reduce is urban sprawl, because you have my own section in the middle of the city is a county pocket, and all of these lots are 1/3 of an acre. So I definitely could split my lot. I'm not going to, because I enjoy, a lot of space between me and my neighbors in the middle of town. But yeah, it definitely brings up those opportunities for neighborhoods like mine to split lots and increase capacity. But then we also have to look at the other part of that, is that, I bought my home for the land and for the space, and to increase that capacity, that's also part of we need to look at, because we're on septic. We're not tied into city sewer. So you have sewer issues, you have septic issues, you have capacity building that all needs to be thought about also when you talk about increasing affordable housing. Because if you increase density, that increase of people, all of the products that people have of trash and sewage and water and the things we need in order to make it safe and hospitable for everybody, we need to take all that into consideration as well.
I want to make sure we get to some more questions. I just wanted to touch on the rental market really quickly. At least in our area, we saw two major events in the pandemic that really affected our rental market. One, there wasn't really any normal rental increases during the pandemic, especially during the eviction moratorium. And part of that, it leads back to a kind of a halt in property value, looking at economic development initiatives that may have been years in the making, but had to come to a sudden halt in these cities and small towns that, for those couple of years, you didn't see the natural property value from, removing blight and condemned properties, facade improvements, larger scale economic development activities in order to kind of bolster the entire community. So you did see a halt in those prices, and now that construction and development initiatives are back in full swing, if not even more so than before, you see that sharp uptick in property value increases in areas where, as Jason said, were affordable naturally and may not be now with those protections not in place. And then the other one that a lot of folks tend to, it's a smaller one, but the supply chain disruptions from the last year and a half or so have inflated housing supply prices, lumber, hardware, drywall, all sorts of different aspects of homes, even for home improvement and for property improvement for a landlord-tenant relationship. With those prices increasing from the supply disruptions, it's going to incentivize landlords without rent controls to drastically increase those rent prices so they can maintain their margin that they had before and still maintain habitability within those properties. So we are seeing those stark increases, and I think there are aspects of the pandemic that are, pushing those forward.
Well, I want to end us on a, excuse me, end us on a more positive note. Would you all be willing to share with us some interventions that you're seeing in the housing area that look promising, or things that are working that you're seeing that are making a difference? It can either be at the national level or at the localized level.
So I'll kick us off on the national level and talk a little bit about, ARPA, and the funds that are sort of, once in a generation investment that's, helping to come out of COVID. And some of the cities are actually putting it towards affordable housing. And not just affordable housing, but actually layering on the shared equity, lasting affordability protections, and understanding that, okay, yeah, this is a once in a generation, a few millions of dollars that we can actually invest in this production. We're going to want to make sure that it just doesn't serve one generation, but it serves multiple generations to come. And I just recently saw what was published by HUD and the Treasury is sort of a playbook for cities that are thinking about using those ARPA dollars for affordable housing, how it fits into the regs, what they need to do, and what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. So I see that as at least progress. That, as what we have learned from the past, especially around natural disasters, where, again, I think about, New Orleans. And New Orleans had hundreds of millions of dollars go in to try to deal with the housing post-Katrina. And right now, most of that city is unaffordable. And one of the things as a TA provider that was working in New Orleans, we were trying to convince the city to, again, put some protections in place, because they're not going to see this type of money come to their city again, hopefully never, and to actually invest it in that way. So I'm glad to see that the federal government is putting forward playbooks and different ideas to say, hey, we're giving you this money. It's not going to be an every sort of year thing. If you want to invest it in affordable housing, this is how you can possibly put some protections in place to make it so that it actually has a more lasting impact than what some of the previous policies have been. So that's, at least from a national perspective, I've seen as a huge positive.
I think from a local perspective, two areas two areas of positive improvement I'm seeing here. There is with the ending of the eviction moratoriums, there is a sharper push for eviction prevention and eviction diversion activity. I've seen pretty strong public-private partnerships that include city officials, nonprofits, mediation, legal representatives, and most importantly, court representatives, judges, clerks, prothonotary. If you do not have the support of the court, it's not going to happen. So, strengthening those relationships, I think it's looking fairly positive right now. We want to be realistic. Eviction and landlord-tenant filings is a naturally occurring part of the rental market. But if we can support certain folks in making sure that it's not a detriment to their rental applications for the next 10 years, then that's a plus for us. On a broader scale, I think looking also just at public-private partnerships in general, I think the pandemic has really revealed that these collaborations between nonprofits, for-profits, and the public sector have been critical in ensuring that everyone receives adequate services in communities, whether that's for homelessness, for rental stability, home ownership, looking at real estate markets, focusing on housing, of course, but in all sorts of sectors. So I think additional public-private partnerships in these smaller communities is having a great impact.
And for us, I think what has been astounding just during coming out of the pandemic and even during tagging onto what Mark said about partnerships is just the innovations that people have come up with in order to try. There's more of an attitude of let's try this to create solutions or find what might be the next step to a better solution versus just going with the tried and true. And this is how we've always thought about it. And this is how it's always been done. And this is how we've always dealt with it. Just being a little bit more out of the box in their thinking and the partnerships that are created, the collaborations that are happening, and just the ideas that they're willing to try to see if that might help just a few more people get into affordable housing or establish affordable housing or even build just the cooperations in building.
Thank you. Do you all have any last comments or questions or anything that you'd like to add to the end of our session today?
Just a note to current master's or certificate students for community development. When you're looking to get into the housing field, it never hurts to apply. It never hurts to apply. Most of us have the training available, and we're just waiting for the right folks to come in the door. So it may look intimidating. There's a lot of data, but you know, we want new talent, and we need you. So keep it in mind.
Yeah, I'll tag on that and say that as far as from my side of things, we are looking for people who are a good fit for the team, not for people who have all of the necessary training, because we will train you to get done what needs to get done. You know.
And I will say, so just as Andrew said, when I was hired as a planner, I didn't have any experience in planning. I understood some zoning. I know how to read regulations and connect all the dots. And I was told it is your personality, your willingness just to cold call people and be out there and just try. And we'll teach you the planning side. That's nobody, you know, as a little kid goes, I want to be a planner when I grow up. So it's just a matter of all experience can be molded into experience that we need and that we can use in this sector.
Yeah, and the piece of advice that I'll give from my own personal experience is volunteerism goes a long way. It's actually, you know, for me, it was an easy way to get in the door, was the ability of sort of giving some of my time, some of my capacity to be around other folks that knew a hell of a lot more than I did. And just being around those folks, and for a number of them are actual mentors to this day that, you know, that I can call upon and ask the tough questions or brainstorm. So having that ability of finding that space where, you know, yes, we all need to balance living and making money, but also just giving some of your time may be just as valuable as having the knowledge yourself, because you just being in those circles, you don't know where that's going to lead.
Well, thank you all. Thank you to Kathy and Mark and Jason for taking time out of your day to do this. I also want to take a moment to thank Alex Hernandez, another member of our student council. She has done all the behind the scenes work and wanted none of the credit for it. So I'm giving her credit now. We couldn't have done this without the work that she did. So we thank her for that. And I appreciate you all. And thank you for being with us, and we'll see you all again.